everyone's ready, because I know we have a lot to cover, we can get this started because we do record these and post them to our socials. It'll be available on X and also YouTube. So I see no problem in kicking it off right now. With that, thank you everyone in attendance and those listening after for a special edition of Midweek with Max, Late Week with Max, seeing it's the end of the week. I'm your community manager, Rick, and with zero further ado, I'm going to kick it right over to Max and Phil.
Awesome, everyone. Thanks everyone for coming out to our Late Week with Max, I suppose is what we're calling it. We had some scheduling conflicts with the other AMA that we were doing on Tuesday. And then we also had the other AMA with Redstone this morning. So thanks for everyone who showed up to those as well. And this week's going to be all about diving into node sale questions, talking about kind of the progress and some of the changes that we're making to the node sale system, and also an update towards mainnet. So super high level, a lot of engineering work this week on moving closer to the mainnet launch, more infrastructure scalability, doing our final HVM phase 0 upgrade and activating that on mainnet. Same stuff we've been testing on testnet now for a couple of months. And we're continuing to get more partners onboarded and launched. And I think this is one of the questions that's on Rick's list. I'm not 100% sure, but there have been some people asking if the mainnet is live because they're seeing Hemi mainnet available on the likes of Stargate or Sushi or free tech or Mason bridging systems. And the answer is mainnet is not launched yet. It's not public, but we have been running a private mainnet for a while now to let partners on board and get ready for the main announcement. So it's not out there and public, and we're not, it doesn't make any sense for people to try to onboard and do anything on it yet. But the way that blockchain network launches work nowadays is you launch them ahead of time, you make them, sort of private in the sense of you're only giving certain parties, access to the information about it and letting them onboard and get ready so that when you do launch, you have all these dApps available. So, back in the day when you launched a blockchain in 2017, you just split it up and the community knew about it with, by the time the second block was propagating on the network. Nowadays, it's a little different because you do have to have all this infrastructure set up from all these third parties. You have to make sure that there's, liquidity deployed in systems and things for people to do day one. So it's a different launch strategy than people from, maybe the Bitcoin or altcoin side may be familiar with. But we've been going through that over the past several months, actually, but obviously accelerating in the last 6 weeks or so. But mainnet is not launched yet. It's just that private mainnet for getting everything ready, getting all the partners onboarded. So with that, I'll kick it over to Phil for any marketing updates, and then we'll jump into questions.
Yeah, as I like to say, the current state of mainnet is, semi-public but not publicized, right? I mean, there's of course an
Hey, Phil, you muted.
Oh, you know what? I said some brilliant stuff just then.
Oh, damn it.
No, seriously. So for some reason, this thing keeps on automatically. For some reason, I'm getting muted like spontaneously, or so. Rick, why don't you just go ahead and continue, and I'll try from my Phil Gomes account. Well, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sounds good, sir. Okay. So we are going to pause on the marketing update and answer some questions, and we're going to circle back to that just so everyone was aware. All right. A lot of questions here, Max. just
all right, let's get started.
Okay. Can you share when mainnet is expected to release? There's been a lot of questions surrounding it.
Yep. Yeah. We are, there's a lot of things in flux. There's the tech side, the tech readiness, making sure everything's scalable and secure and ready to go. There's the partner onboarding side and making sure that we have all the right DApps deployed and tested and ready to go for mainnet day one. There's also the liquidity component, making sure that some of our partners have deployed liquidity and made it available on the applications for the assets that we want people to be engaging with. There's some stuff on the staking side, making sure that there's yield opportunities basically available for users from day one. So there's a lot of components that go into the mainnet date, which is why it keeps moving around. Right now, we have strong confidence that we're going to be doing it by the end of February. We're not going to announce a specific date at the moment, but probably in the coming week and a half, we will announce an actual final date and time for that mainnet launch. But we are, we're launching imminently, and we're in the final countdown towards getting mainnet publicly launched, publicly available, and starting the mainnet exploit program and taking the snapshots for a testnet. But for now, everything is continuing as normal, and that means the testnet points program is still ongoing. You can still engage with that up until shortly before mainnet. We'll announce the exact dates around that, but we will announce a date where the testnet incentives end and we take a snapshot. So that means pop mining is going to end. Anything on-chain you're doing with swapping or creating capsules, all of those will end at the end of the testnet season date that we'll announce in the next 7 to 10 days. And then there'll probably be a few day lag between that date and the mainnet launch date, just to give time for us to make sure all the point accounting is correct and focus on the mainnet launch from a tech perspective. So testnet's running as normal. The points program there is still active. We are still in the testnet incentivization season. We will announce an end date to that. We'll announce a launch date for mainnet. And on mainnet launch day is when the mainnet season 1 points program will start. And there will be actual mainnet tasks to do for, using DEXs, providing liquidity in DEXs and lending protocols, engaging with all sorts of other apps, staking Bitcoin and Ethereum ecosystem assets and various protocols, and a lot of other stuff which we will be announcing soon.
All right. And that brings us clearly to TGE. So following mainnet, when do we expect TGE to happen?
That is still TBD, but the goal is to do TGE probably within 4 to 6 weeks of mainnet launch. So exact date TBD, things may change, but the current plan is get mainnet launched, get momentum, and then as part of that momentum, launch TGE, launch the token into that momentum. So probably 4 to 6 weeks post mainnet launch.
This is all super exciting because typically we say soon, and now we have some times attached. So everyone take note.
We are getting closer, and note these times are not carved in stone yet. We're trying to be transparent, but things change. There's external factors, and obviously there's some stuff that could end up delaying that. Market conditions. Right before our node sale kicked off on Monday, we saw a crazy flash crash over the weekend. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into TGE date, but that is the current thinking that we're targeting. But just do be aware that is those are soft timelines. Things do change, things do shift, and to tell like a mainnet launch, there's a lot of stuff that you have to have in place and ready to go for a successful TGE. And so we are not going to rush into that. We're going to do it when the timing is right. So it's probably 4 to 6 weeks, but again, that is probably, and there are assumptions and external factors. There's a lot of stuff in our control that goes into it. There's a lot of stuff outside our control that also goes into that date.
Awesome update. Before we get into some node sale questions, I would be remiss to not ask this, just because it's been asked a couple times. Is there any news you can share regarding Veriblock?
Nothing yet, but we are definitely getting closer to making an announcement there. So definitely stay tuned.
All right, let's move into the node sale questions that we did not address on Tuesday. Why is it important to correlate percentages based on FDV?
Correlate percentages based on SDV. I'm not sure is this for the different node tiers and the determination of, or how the FDV is being calculated for those? Or I guess I'll talk about that, and if that doesn't answer the question, feel free to ask Rick for additional clarification. So FDV is based on, well, taking a step back, let's talk about general tokenomics real quick, and then we'll get into the FDV calculation. So the overall Hemi tokenomics, there will be 10 billion tokens initially, and that doesn't mean supply on the street. That means authorized by the protocol as part of the initial pie. And so there's, that's everything from the community tokens to tokens from the seed round to other future potential rounds of funding to the tokens allocated for the node sale. There's stuff for advisors, there's stuff for liquidity provisioning. And so all those go into that 10 billion number. And then the Hemi network additionally has between 3 and 7% emissions per year on top of that pays pop miners, sequencers outside of the node sale, people who engage in the decentralized publishing and challenging systems. Obviously, when all of those launch and are decentralized, and there may be other protocol incentivized activities in the future that also go into that, maybe something around decentralized ZK proof networks or whatever. And so all of that's coming out of that 3 to 7% emissions. So you have 10 billion is the base where the initial pie chart and all the allocations come out of. A lot of those will be on lockup schedules and not available day one, obviously, but that is that initial token allocation. And then there's that perpetual 3 to 7% emissions to pay for all the different roles that people will take in the network that help operate the network, secure the network, and make sure that Hemi remains a functioning decentralized network. And so that's the high level tokenomics. FDV calculations are based off of that 10 billion initial value. So if you want to calculate, effective FDV after 3 years, you would take, you basically add between 9 and 21% of emissions over those 3 years and factor that into the FDV calculation 3 years out. And so FDV for the different tiers of the node sale, those are calculated, again, based on that 10 billion value and the number of tokens that the node is guaranteed, assuming that the node is running throughout its entire life cycle. So there's 3 tiers of nodes. The 3 different nodes have different life cycles, which is basically the unlock schedule for the tokens. And so you have the fastest emitting node, the Explorer node, at an FDV of 330 million. And that's over a 12-month emission schedule. And then Voyager is 24 months, Pathfinder is 48 months. And those all do get the same number of tokens. It's just how they are released. And then the longer term nodes do have additional potential stream of token income beyond the 22,722 tokens through the protocol, basically sharing the incoming base fees in certain percentages. So FDVs are the worst case as far as assuming you just got the guaranteed token allocation for the node, that 22,727 tokens, and does not take into account the sequencing tips that all nodes will earn once decentralized sequencing is launching, nor do they account for, in the Pathfinder and Voyager nodes, that portion of the base fees that also gets allocated to the nodes. And to clear up the mechanics for those, the base fee sharing, basically, all of the Pathfinder nodes collectively, all 1,100 of them, will share that 10% of the base fees over that 4-year lifespan, up to 2 times the node's cost. That will be marked to market based on the Hemi tokens that the fees are converted into and distributed. So, for example, if the protocol earns, say, $1 million of fees in a particular month, 10% of that's 100,000. That 100,000, whether it's collected in ETH or Bitcoin or in Hemi tokens natively, those will all be converted into Hemi tokens using an on-chain DEX. And then those $100,000 worth of those tokens in that month would be distributed to the Pathfinder nodes. And then separately for the Voyager nodes, 8%. So 80,000 would be converted into Hemi and distributed to the people actively running the Voyager nodes. And then that either ends at the end of that node's lifespan, so after 48 months for the Pathfinder or 24 months for the Voyager, or until you reach either 2x the node's cost or 1x, depending on 2x for the Pathfinder or 1x for the Voyager. So if by month 37, all Pathfinder nodes had received $1,000 worth of base fees converted into Hemi, valued at the time where those Hemi tokens are distributed in each of those fee distribution epochs, then that base fee sharing would stop. Or if you get to the end of that 48 months for the Pathfinder node, for this example, and you haven't gotten 2 times the node cost, again, valued mark to market for the Hemi tokens distributed and collected and distributed as part of base fees, then those would end after the 48 months. So it's whatever comes first, either getting 2x the node value mark to market of Hemi tokens from base fee conversions, or 4 years elapsed and the node has essentially expired after its lockup schedule completes. So I know that was a lot of information. Hopefully that helps clear up FDV calculation. So it is that worst case just based on the guaranteed allocation. And as a reminder that you only get that guaranteed allocation if you are successfully running your node for the entire life cycle. And also we did get some questions about the initial TGE unlock of the node tokens. That TGE unlock does not happen at TGE. It happens when you first spin up your node at or post TGE. So if you have your node running when TGE occurs, you do get them instantly at TGE. If you were to wait 3 weeks and then spin up your node, you would not get your initial 10 to 30%, depending on the node, until you first spin up your node. And at that point, you'd get the initial TGE release, and then you would start earning tokens on the normal investing schedule. And you don't earn tokens for time that your node's not running. So for example, the Explorer node runs over 12 months. If during that 12 months, there's 1 week where your node is not running, then you only receive 50 seconds of the total tokens remaining after that initial TGE unlock. So you do have to be actively running a node, participating in the network by running that node to earn that string of tokens on the unlock schedule.
All right. Apologies in advance. If any of this is redundant information, feel free to just let me know and we can move on to the next. But I do have related questions to what you just covered. Regarding FDV, is that already confirmed?
It is confirmed as far as the valuation of the tokens you're getting as part of each tier relative to the price. So the node, so if you're buying a Pathfinder node, you're basically guaranteed, assuming you run your node successfully, you're guaranteed to get a number of tokens at a price that equates to in that case, 220 million FDV based on the initial 10 billion tokens. So the FDV calculations are confirmed in the sense that those are the worst case FDV that you're acquiring tokens at for buying that particular node. I'm not sure if there's another question there. We obviously, nobody knows what the FDV will be at any point in time based on like actual market mechanics, but those FDVs are calculated based on the effective worst case price that you are acquiring the tokens at for buying that node license and then running the respective node.
All right. What is the maximum Hemi token supply?
It is technically unbounded, but it is bounded within certain time periods. So same or very similar mechanics to, say, Ethereum, for example. There is not a total number of tokens that will ever exist, but there is a maximum number of tokens that will exist within 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, based on that 3 to 7% emissions on top of the 10 billion initial authorized float. So if you want to do the math, if you want to say, what's the best and worst case for the total number of Hemi tokens in circulation after a year, it'd be at 10 billion tokens plus on the low end 3% for the emissions, on the high end 7%. If you wanted to look at 2 years, it'd be, and that's it's compounding. But you'd look at basically 10 billion for a 2-year period, 10 billion plus, roughly 6% on the low end, or 14% on the high end, if the 7% gets emitted both years. And for what determines whether it's 3 or 7% or somewhere in between, that's based on what the protocol has to pay for all of the protocol operations to run successfully. And so the amount that's paid out to sequencers, separate from the node sale, but other sequencers, the node sale gets a protected guaranteed allocation collectively of 5.5% of that initial supply. But they will get 2% of the 3 to 7%, so they're always fixed at 2%, and the remaining 1 to 5% will be based on how much the protocol has to pay for pot miners based on Bitcoin fee market dynamics, and then a small portion of that will also be how much is needed to pay for non-subsidized publication activities on Ethereum. So most people, everybody, when you run a L2 transaction, you're paying a DA fee, so that goes towards paying the fees that a publisher has to pay to publish a blog to Ethereum. But there is also some baseline publications that have to occur as part of the protocol that nobody's subsidizing. So those also account towards that 1 to 5% extra emissions on top of the guaranteed 2% sequencer emissions. And those depend on essentially Bitcoin and Ethereum fee market dynamics.
All right. Still in the realm of nodes, I've purchased a validator passport. When will it activate?
They will activate on TGE, and that's when the unlock schedule will start ticking. So if TGE is, let's say April 5th, just to pull out a random date, there's no meaning to that date. Then April 5th, if you're running a node on April 5th, then you would immediately receive your TGE unlock allocation as long as your node's online. And then the 12, 24, 48 month unlock schedule would start ticking on that April 5th date. You'd receive rewards. Not sure whether it's going to be daily or, 2 times a day or 4 times a day, but at a, day-ish interval or better, you'll receive your portion of the remaining tokens after the TGE unlock amounts removed from the total token allocation. You'll receive that essentially per day for each day that your node is active for the life cycle of that node. And then for when the nodes will turn from RPC nodes to sequencer nodes, we're planning on decentralizing the Hemi sequencer system in Q3 of this year. And so whatever date, say that was, August 1st, again, to pull out a random date, no meaning behind that date, then between April 5th and, in that case, August 1st, your node would be earning fees for being an RPC node on the network, or earning, rather, your tokens as part of your node license for running the RPC node. And then when sequencing goes active on, in that case, August 1st, then you would start sequencing blocks on the network, and you would receive additional revenue from the transaction tips that are paid to the miner for the transactions that you sequence in your blocks.
Awesome. And I do want to stress that those were hypothetical dates, so please no one start
Totally made up. Just, yeah.
First, totally hypothetical. He was giving an example. I just want to be transparent. Okay. Will node buyers need TBTC on Bitcoin testnet 3?
No. Node, if you, to purchase a node, you need USDC on Arbitrum, and then to run the node, all you need is the node NFT, which you'll be given when they're basically at Hemi mainnet launch. You'll get the node NFT, and then you just need to spin up a node and basically connect that NFT license to the node to start receiving the income. So you don't need to do any sort of anything with pot mining. You don't need to own testnet Bitcoin or mainnet Bitcoin. All you need is to buy the node, you need that USDC on Arbitrum, and then to run the node, you just need the node license, which you're purchasing basically.
All right. Will owning a validator passport affect eligibility for rewards on mainnet? Some people are only doing the absent tasks.
The nodes are completely separate from any of the incentive programs. So the testnet season, that is only for testnet activities. So the rewards for participating in testnet, doing pop mining or swapping or being part of the tunneling in the open season, when we did open season, all of that is coming out of an entirely separate allocation. And doing one is not relevant to the other. You can do both. You can do one or the other. You can do neither or get nothing if you want. But those are totally separate allocations. Same for mainnet. Mainnet season 1 will be largely about on-chain mainnet activities, things like providing liquidity, engaging with certain DApps. Those incentives will shift around as we try to incentivize areas that need more liquidity, that we think will bring more users and enable more applications in the Hemi ecosystem. But those will be completely unrelated to the nodes. The nodes, you are running infrastructure for the network, and then when the sequencer decentralization occurs, you are contributing to the decentralized sequencing of the network. So helping to run the network, create blocks, provide that intermediate consensus security for transactions prior to achieving Bitcoin finality through POP. And that has nothing to do with the on-chain tasks that would be incentivized as part of season 1, season 2, whatever in mainnet. So totally separate mechanics, separate reward pools, separate types of users engaging with those. You can engage in all of them if you want, but you'll only be receiving the allocation in each of those systems for what you do within that system. So you only receive points in mainnet season 1 for doing mainnet season 1 tasks. That has nothing to do with whether you do or do not have a node license or what you're doing with that node license.
All right, still on the validator passports. If I get 2 validator passports, can I run 2 nodes? And how will I differentiate them both when setting the node up?
Yep, good question. So you can effectively link up to 100 passports of any sort. So it could be 10 Explorer and 90 Voyager. It could be 25 Pathfinder, 25 Voyager, 50 Explorer, whatever. You can link up to 100 node licenses to one physical node. So if you rent a VPS and spin up node software, and you're providing in the beginning decentralized RPC, later being involved in the sequencing process, you can link up to 100 node licenses to that one physical node, and you get the equivalent rewards of all of those node licenses combined. We may expand that when we do decentralize the sequencer, where you could link more licenses to one node than 100, but 100 is the minimum, and that's what we're going to be going with for the at least the RPC portion. It may increase later. But yeah, you can link up to 100 licenses to a single physical operating node. And also, I think relevant to that discussion is we are going to be working with third-party infrastructure providers. So if you don't want to run your node yourself, either at home or renting a VPS somewhere to run it on, you can use them and they will run the node for you. And you'll pay them basically a small portion of the node license revenues. So you'll delegate, X percent to them, and that's their payment for running the infrastructure. And then the rest goes to your wallet for running the node or causing the node to be run on behalf of your licenses. I will announce more details on that soon. We're still talking with the different infrastructure. I totally forgot. I think we were talking about node infrastructure, like running a node. Oh yeah. How many licenses and all that.
Yes.
So you can link 100 licenses. Yep. Yeah. You can link 100 validator passports of any mix of the types to a single physical node. And we are working with node and infrastructure providers. For people who don't want to run that themselves, they can use that infrastructure provider. They'll delegate a small portion of their node revenue to the provider, and we'll announce which providers those are soon. We're still in talks with them and trying to negotiate the best deal for the Hemi community there. But those will be an option. Also, people could run third-party node infrastructure services if they wanted to, because it will be a permissionless system in the sense of anyone can delegate a node to anyone else. And so third-party providers may pop up too that compete and offer stuff cheaper. But we will make sure there's at least one option, hopefully two, of ones that we work with, who we have worked with to set up the nodes correctly, know how to maintain them and monitor them and all that. But yeah, high level, will be node providers, or you can run your own. The specs will not be too crazy. It'll be 2 to 4 modern CPU cores, 8 to 16 gigs of RAM, and 1 to 2 terabytes of disk space required to run the node. And again, if you have multiple node licenses, you only have to run that node once, and you can link up to 100 of them to it. But for people who, just have one license and, running their own infrastructure doesn't make sense, those infrastructure providers help bridge that gap.
All right. Thank you for that. And the prior sentiment before everything went to hell. What will happen? What will happen to tokens allocated to unsold node?
If we don't sell through, so I guess let me step back and talk about kind of general updates of the node sale. So we are extending the public sale. It was originally going to end yesterday. We are extending it. We will announce an end date to it in the future. Basically, the private sale, the goal was to give the community who's been with us through incentivized testnet access to it early to make sure, basically give them the best discount, the best price possible for the nodes. And so the end date of that is TBD. We've kicked it out. We're giving people more time. A lot of the people we're talking to on more the VC KOL side, who the round is also made to be able to bring those people in. They need more time for due diligence. Obviously, Chinese New Year, our lunchtime coincided with that. And so having a lot of those discussions was a lot more difficult than we anticipated. And that's on us, but that's why we're reworking the scheduling. So we'll see how the rest of the private sale goes once we are able to have all those conversations with VCs and KOLs as well. And then we may adjust the size of the public sale. We may keep it to what was originally announced. That's TBD. We'll announce all that information when we get there. That being said, unsold nodes, if there are unsold nodes in the program, the tokens will basically go somewhere else in the community pile. So what that means exactly, TBD. It may be, that they are used for more. It could be, another funding round in the future with the community. It could be something with, being able to extend mainnet incentive seasons out further, into, 2 years instead of 18 months or however long the current season, mainnet season, incentivization seasons for mainnet would otherwise last. So TBD on that, but they basically go back to the community pile and go somewhere else to some other sub-allocation.
All right, moving right along. Will rewards for testnet users full unlock or be vested?
Still TBD. There will probably be some sort of a system where you earn more if you state them in some sort of a system. There may be some lockups applied to some of the tokens. Still TBD, and we'll announce details on that relatively soon. It has not been even decided internally, so there is still more work to do, and part of that also depends on, again, how many people verify through Deimos. That informs how many real users and real points we're actually incentivizing. We don't want to do a thing where we have an allocation that doesn't coincide with the number of unique individuals who are actually collecting that. And so all of that goes into that decision. It has not been made yet, but we will announce more information on that soon.
All right, I'm going to try to combine these to the best of my ability. What is the target TVL for the Hemi network? And when will the TVL and full tokenomics be released?
Good question. I'll say high level, stay tuned. Like in the very near future, we have some exciting announcements coming out on that front. TVL, there's not a quote unquote target. It is, maximize useful TVL. So the way TVL works in crypto, it originally started out as there was a bunch of basically BS. And if you go like way back before, I think people were even using the term TVL, maybe this was the very beginning of it. There were like projects on Solana, for example, where it was the same developer with 20 projects, and they put $1 into project A and then pull a receipt token out and put that into project B and then pull a receipt token out. And so there's a lot of double or quadruple or, 20x counting, and none of that TVL was doing something productive. And that's been for quite a while. Some version of that, obviously it's been pared down and there's more scrutiny, but some version of that has persisted and continues to persist. Although, like DeFi Llama, for example, they're making an initiative to really try to look only at productive TVL that is unique and doing something in an ecosystem. And so that is what we're focused on as a project, is making sure we're onboarding TVL that actually adds value to the protocol. So not, some, nonsense token that isn't tradable and just, sits in a smart contract and you can point at it and say, hey, look, TVL, when it's, it may not be even backed by anything. It's not productive at all. We're focusing on getting productive TVL. And, as far as numbers, I think we'll have some exciting announcements coming soon on some of the liquidity that we're going to have coming into the Hemi ecosystem. But yeah, there's not a target. It's more of a, what we can get that makes sense, that incentivizes the correct activities and enables people to do the things in DeFi that we want them to be able to do. So making sure there's liquidity for trading a bunch of different types of Bitcoin LSTs and LRTs, making sure there is liquidity for lending protocols. And that's going to evolve over time. And we'll see where it ends. But yeah, obviously we have quite a robust TVL strategy, and we are heavily focused on productive TVL, not that, BS TVL meta that is finally now falling out of fashion.
All right. How long will activity on mainnet be incentivized, and when is it likely to end?
That's TBD. I'd say on the low end, at least a year. On the high end, it could be, potentially 2 years, maybe even a bit beyond that. But there will be incentivized mainnet activities, I believe, for at a bare minimum, at least a year.
That is great news for the community. I got a hypothetical for you, Max. Hypothetically, which will be more cost effective in your opinion, buying $500 of nodes or start pledging $500 of liquidity?
A lot of this depends on your time horizon. The node is like if you had $500 and again, this is not financial advice, yada, 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 caveat. They are different in mechanics. And so let's talk through that. If you're buying a node, you are, trading your $500 for a node that is productive and contributing to the security of Hemi's infrastructure, basically. And so that's going to get rewards for that $500 versus what you'd get liquidity mining with $500 in most cases. Caveat emptor, there could be somebody who brings crazy incentives to Hemi that we're not even thinking about, and that changes things. Heavily doubted, but have to give that caveat. That being said, it's different mechanics, because with the node sale, you are spending that $500 to buy a node that is productive and contributes to the ecosystem. And so you get a lot of tokens for that $500 that you're spending. Whereas for liquidity, you're putting up $500, there is risk, obviously, of impermanent loss and of impermanent gain, theoretically. And so it's an entirely different mechanic, because you're not trading in that $500 to buy something. You are temporarily providing that $500. So there's a lot less incentives for providing $500 for a period of time and then later taking it out, versus spending that $500 and buying something with it that then produces tokens for your contribution to the Hemi network. So different mechanics. If you want to maximize the number of Hemi tokens you can get with $500, it would be the node license 99.99% probability. But do be aware of these different mechanics. With the $500 of liquidity, you're yield mining, you're keeping the underlying asset. So it's kind of comparing apples to oranges in a way.
And I do want to stress that this was a hypothetical question with a hypothetical answer. So please no one take that out of context. If my primary wallet is compromised, can it be replaced before or during TGE?
This one's tricky, and it depends on what you mean by, well, I guess what you were doing with the wallet that was compromised. At the end of the day, users are responsible for making sure that their key stays secure. If there's, depending on what you had in the wallet, there may be something, and I'm not making promises, but there may be something that the team can do to help you, like with, your points or something like that. But, generally speaking, if a key gets compromised, the assets in it are compromised. And, unless you have something sophisticated set up, this is why for a large amount of assets, people should be using, Gnosis safes or, on-chain appliances of that sort that give, additional security and ways to access funds if you lose a key or one key gets compromised. So it really depends on what happened. There, again, may be something that we could do on the point side if it was your, testnet key that got compromised. But it's also hard to validate, if you're saying your account was compromised, is it really you saying that, or is it the person who compromised your account, right? And so that creates a lot of work for the team, and it creates a lot of issues where we may actually be talking to the imposter instead of you, because ultimately the root of trust of your interactions with the chain are based on that key. So unfortunately, that is the reality of crypto, and I'm not going to commit our time to doing investigative work to try to decide, who the right person is. But case by case basis, if something did happen, reach out and we can see what we can do about it. But, that is the reality. Luckily, we're not in mainnet yet, and hopefully you weren't using mainnet somehow that we're not advising people do. So, we are just talking about the testnet points program and, some Sepolia ETH that you had in your wallet rather than real mainnet assets. But this is a good time to remind everybody, make sure your wallet is very well secure. There's a lot of guides and tutorials on the internet for best practices for generating and securing keys. If you have a lot of assets, I'd strongly recommend looking into multi-sig solutions, whether that be, native multi-sig with something like, or technically not multi-sig, but, key sharding with something like Shamir, or whether it be something on-chain like a Gnosis safe with multiple external EOAs, and being able to balance the security and recoverability of those assets between those different EOAs that then you secure separately. So, one's in a lockbox, one's your hot wallet, one's another cold wallet. There's social recovery systems. So if you have a lot of assets that you're putting on a network, you owe it to yourself to look into case security. And this is just a good time to give that reminder.
Also, I have an addendum to that from Joshua. And please do not run random scripts from the internet, especially for running pop miners.
Yes, for anything, but especially if somebody in crypto says, hey, run this script to make money, unless you read through that script, you know exactly what it does, do not run that script. There are all kinds of phishing attacks. There are all kinds of, people are getting incredibly sophisticated. There's even people you will meet at crypto events who you meet in person, you connect with, and then they basically turn you over to some sort of, scam center who then continues to interact with you and pretend to be that person that you met in person at an event. So be vigilant, be careful, don't run random stuff. Use the maximum security that you can without, completely compromising usability. For most things in DeFi, that means, at a minimum, use a hardware wallet. There's all kinds of stuff you can do to provide even more security, doing things like air gapping. So maybe we could have a separate segment on security someday and get some of the people on the Hemi team to go over different security best practices and advice. Here's not the forum for that, but as a reminder, crypto security is it's ultimately your responsibility, and you owe it to yourself to make sure you do everything within your power to have, operate securely. You should not have a MetaMask wallet with any appreciable amount of money with an unlocked private key sitting in your browser. Browsers are vulnerable. There's all kinds of attacks against browsers. Plugins can compromise other plugins. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Be safe, be smart. Don't run random stuff from random people, please.
And just to add to that, before I move on to the next question, just a reminder that the Hemi team The mods and the helpers will never DM you on Discord. If you're getting a DM from anyone claiming to be from the Hemi team, a mod, or a community helper, and you don't have a personal relationship with them, it is not us. So be safe, security first. The Hemi allocation for the community is 32%, and the points from the testnet and mainnet will be separated. Who will get more Hemi token allocation, testnet users or mainnet users?
It's hard to compare apples to oranges here because there are two totally different programs. Testnet is for testing the network. So somebody who did a ton of testing on testnet and then did very little on mainnet, they would earn more from their testnet allocation. As far as total bucket sizes, mainnet's going to have more users and they're doing actual real economic activity. So the bucket for mainnet, I'm sure, will be larger than the bucket for the testnet incentivized season. But how much you as an individual earn between those programs will be based on if you did, again, tons of testnet and very little on mainnet, or none on mainnet, obviously, then you're getting more for your testnet participation, and vice versa. If you're providing large amounts of liquidity on mainnet, that's incentivized according to the amount of liquidity that you're providing. So high level, the mainnet total allocation, I'm sure, will be higher than the testnet allocation. But as an individual, it depends how you're engaging with both of those incentive programs.
Okay, we have reached the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of people's times, but we do have a lot more questions.
I can stay on for another 30 minutes.
Okay, if that works for everyone, we can keep this rolling and I can get through these questions. Hopefully. All right, let's see. Okay, regarding transparency, many things such as the node sale and adding liquidity to the ETH mainnet have not been communicated in advance. It's caused some distrust among community members. If you decide to do something, the community would appreciate disclosing the rules of the event and the event conditions clearly prior to or at the beginning of the event. Otherwise, no one knows the rules because you don't want to say the rules. So that's both a question and a statement.
There's definitely truth to that, especially with the node sale. Like the communication for that, we did not do a good job on our side. A lot of that is, I'll take some responsibility for that for sure. Things should have been communicated better. People should have known, understood the economics. We should have been able to have an AMA where we talked more about the details and people could ask these questions prior to the sale going live. So lessons learned there for sure. We're doing everything we can to do better in the future on that. As for incentives like ETH mainnet, we have communicated those before. Like at a very high level, we've talked about them on previous Midweek with Maxes. At a minimum, there may have been some discussion in Discord, I'm not sure. But also those are not live yet. This is still talking about things that will go live with mainnet. So when mainnet is publicly launched, we will announce the initial points programs. Ideally, we'll give people a few days to understand those point systems and be ready to engage with them in whatever way that they decide makes sense for them. So just to clarify, there's not, obviously we're working with some partners who are providing TVL and we have direct, deals and negotiations with those third parties who were using to bootstrap liquidity on Hemi. But for everybody participating as part of the public incentives, you will know what those are ahead of time. You will be given some time to ask questions and get clarification on those before those points programs go live. Ultimately, there will be changes to those points programs. We will shift incentives around to different things in the ecosystem that make more sense and bring more value to the Hemi protocol. And so, stay tuned for, post mainnet, stay tuned for more updates and changes. We'll do our best to give people heads up on those and communicate them effectively. But just for clarity, adding liquidity to ETH mainnet from a points incentives perspective, that is still a future item, and information will be provided on that prior to mainnet launch so people can prepare and take appropriate steps. As for other things, there's some stuff where, there's probably three categories. There's some stuff we can't talk about for legal reasons. it is what it is. And if you're in crypto and you've been engaging with projects that try to adhere to, a reasonable, if not fairly conservative interpretation of a lot of the laws and regulations and best practices for the industry, there's some stuff that we'd love to talk about and we just can't talk about, unfortunately. We try to do our best to still communicate the things that people do need to know that are relevant to those things, but there are some limitations there that are just outside of our control. The second category, there's stuff that there's a lot of stuff that's not finalized, and so when we talk about stuff like, even for example, the TGE timing that I'm saying probably 4 to 6 weeks post mainnet, that is still not decided. And if we start, and I try to caveat that appropriately so people understand, we're trying to share information as we feel comfortable sharing it, and that it's, reasonable given our current knowledge, but that it may change. And, if we were to have communicated things that we, thought were probably true back in September, and we did that prematurely without being more careful, it would just lead to more confusion. So that's a component. We don't want to overshare things we're not sure about, or if there are things that we're somewhat sure about, we want to share and be transparent, but caveat that appropriately, because there's a lot of factors that go into a successful project launch, and we don't want to back ourselves into a corner where we've made, specific commitments to do things that are no longer in the best interest of the project. And so, obviously, if we make a commitment, we want to stick to it. And so we don't want to commit to things that we aren't sure about and then be, again, backed into a corner and have to do something that doesn't make sense for the protocol, given evolving market conditions, given, something internally takes longer than we expect on the tech side or the partner side or whatever. So there is a balance with what we communicate. And, if we were to live stream 24/7 all of our conversations, it would lead to a lot of confusion, and it would lead to a lot of people doing things, thinking one thing, and then things shift in crypto on a daily basis. And so, things are up and down, crazy ideas, doing this, not doing that, all of that. And internally, we don't want to, jerk around the community with different ideas and thoughts and thinking before it's, well decided and mature and something that we can feel confident presenting with, some amount of conviction that we can stand behind. So that's why some things that's, hey, we can't talk about that right now. More info soon, stay tuned. And it's better to do that than to communicate information that has to change. And as, some evidence of that, we've been talking about mainnet launch. Obviously, it's been getting delayed. There's good reasons for that. But even, that amount of transparency with what we currently thought mainnet, when mainnet was going to launch back when we were talking in December, and then back when we were talking in January, communicating and being transparent about our current hopes and aspirations and, convictions within, some level of things could change. That's led some people in the community to become frustrated as well. So it's a balancing act between the two for sure. So we try to be transparent. We try to say things that we believe are true and we have conviction around. We definitely did not do a great job of communicating on the node sale, and we're taking lessons learned from that. But a lot of things we either can't talk about or talking about prematurely would create confusion and frustration for other reasons. So that is unfortunately the reality of running a project like this with so many moving pieces.
All right. Thank you so much for that response. Hopefully that explains things, and people understand, because it is a fact of the matter. Regarding testnet and then shifting to pop mining, various problems have existed on testnet for many months. Has the Hemi team paid attention to the problems raised by the community, such as capsule, point details and delays, demos, and the faucets being closed to impossible use due to severe problems that have not been solved/resolved?
Good question. Short answer is yes. And the longer answer is we're triaging between what is a testnet only problem and what is something that will be relevant in mainnet. And we're prioritizing all the mainnet items. And so Capsule is a bit of an odd, special case. And we are working on some improvements and fixes on that side. Everything else, let's take pop mining, for example. Pop mining on testnet is way different than mainnet. And, as a team with a finite number of people and a finite number of hours in the day, and, people have families and they have to eat and they have to sleep, there's only so much we can get done. And so we have to prioritize the things that lead to a long-term successful mainnet. And, testnet, again, pop mining is a great example. The pop mining on testnet is way different than the pop mining on mainnet. On testnet, we're seeing, hundreds of thousands of people running software, and we've, tried to scale up the back end for that. We've done overall a relatively good job of doing that, given time, resources, and just the sheer amount of volume. I think, bandwidth-wise, we're pumping something like 20 or 30 terabytes of data out a month just for serving pop miners. And the reality is, in mainnet, that number may be 5. Maybe on the high end, it's 10 instead of 100,000. And so over-optimizing and spending a lot of the team's time scaling up something like pop mining to be able to handle 1 million users, it doesn't make sense, given limited resources, to focus on that versus focusing on, say, adding a new feature that's going to be widely used for mainnet, or doing a bunch of testing of, HVM, or, the fork resolution protocol that's actually relevant to security. And so it is a balancing act between, making sure that testnet is testing the things that we do want to test, and we're giving incentives. And a lot of that is about load testing and finding edge cases, and we want to do all that in testnet. But there are things that are problems in testnet that will not be problems in mainnet. And so we can't prioritize working on those when there's things that will actually matter in mainnet that we have to focus on. So any of the things that people have experienced in testnet that will also be relevant in mainnet, those are high priorities. We've been working on a lot of those. There's still some work to do there, but making great progress. For the things that are testnet specific, faucets is another one. There will not be faucets in mainnet. The faucet was initially a way for users to easily onboard and participate in testnet. There's a lot of value to having a faucet and being able to onboard those users. But they're running a faucet at the scale that we're talking about is incredibly difficult, from not only getting the raw assets to provide in those faucets, but also managing abuse of the faucets. People trade testnet tokens for real money. So whenever you open a faucet, there are people who they will spend their entire day figuring out how to game that system. And then when you putting out roadblocks in place, they will figure out other ways to game that system. And so, running a large-scale production faucet that is almost like its own mini business. And at some point, we had to say, hey, we've spent a lot of engineering time on this. We spent a lot of resources on, trying to provide this to the community. It is continually getting abused. And, while if that was the only thing we were focused on, we could do an excellent job of running an amazing faucet. Given limited resources, that just can't be the priority. We have to focus on what is going to actually contribute to a stable, secure, quality mainnet launch, because that ultimately is the goal here. The goal is not to run, the best casino simulator on testnet. It is to test all the edge cases of the network and be very informed about what things we actually need to address and monitor and be concerned about for mainnet and the usage patterns we're going to see on mainnet. So I understand it's been a frustrating experience for a lot of testnet users, whether it's, not having access to a faucet, or whether it being, pop mining, not being able to connect to BFG. And unfortunately, we do just have to prioritize mainnet stuff over, scaling out testnet and doing a lot of work that will basically be thrown away as soon as we launch mainnet. So it is what it is. We understand the frustration. We are trying to do some stuff around the points and incentives that, take that frustration work into account. But at the end of the day, the goal here is not a amazing testnet. It is to get what we need out of testnet to build a successful, scalable, stable mainnet.
Here's my unmute button. Sorry about that. All right, switching gears to pop mining. Okay. How will Hemi address the concerns of pop miners who have concerns about being cooked, etc., due to other incentives such as like the node sale and whatnot? So how can we ease the fears of pop miners?
So node sale, that is entirely separate from all of the testnet incentives. So from a incentives perspective, if you're doing pop mining, all that matters is the number of points you're getting for pop mining versus the rest of the testnet incentives program. We've had some other things come up internally, especially dealing with the node sale, but we will be publishing the actual pop points to Absinthe very, very soon. I'm hoping to get to that this weekend, actually. But yes, pop mining, if you've been engaged in pop mining, you will be getting a appreciable number of points that represent, the amount of work and maintenance and monitoring and, setup and tracking your releases and this and that goes into running a pop miner. As I've said before, the way that we're going to be doing those points for pop mining and incentivized testnet is going to be based around how you compared to other people who are in the same boat, basically. So if we had, an infrastructure outage and nobody was able to pop mine, or people were only able to, pop mine one keystone on average, that's the benchmark that you will be compared to for that points allocation. And so again, hoping to get the actual details and breakdown and basically give everybody an audit report of what pop points they earned, how they earned them, what they did to earn those. Hoping to get that out to the community very soon. But the number of pop points and the way that we're doing the distribution is carefully designed to take into account the infrastructure outages, the limitations of not having faucet available for large periods of time, stuff of that nature. So we're doing the best job we can to make sure that that's a fair distribution. We also can't give all the incentives to pop miners because there's other stuff of value that people are doing on testnet that's helping load test other parts of the system. And so it is a balance there. But your pop miners are not competing with the node sale. They're not competing with, mainnet incentives. Those are all completely separate piles. And really the only thing of concern there is how many points do you get for the pop mining you did relative to the other pop miners? And then how does that stack up relative to the rest of the points in the incentivized testnet season?
All right, sticking on the topic of pop mining. After mining a keystone, how long will it take for pop miners to be rewarded on mainnet?
On mainnet, it'll be, I believe, 6 hours. So between mining, roughly 6 hours, it depends a little bit on Bitcoin's block timing. So Bitcoin can produce 3 blocks in a minute. It can take an hour and a half to produce a single block. So there's a little bit of variability, but it'll average out to 6 hours.
All right. Will pop miner be available, or will it end when mainnet releases? I believe you just addressed that because it sounds like pop miner's going to be mainnet.
Yeah, the whole point of testing pop mining was an anticipation of people doing pop mining on mainnet. I know we've discussed this in previous weeks, but I think it's worth revisiting. The pop mining for mainnet, the incentives are going to behave a lot differently. So testnet, it was, if you're doing pop mining, you're getting points for it. And the more people who pop mine, the more points are distributed for pop mining. In mainnet, and there's 2 parts to this, there's pre-TGE and post-TGE. So pre-TGE, you're going to earn basically pop points in air quotes. And we'll release actual deep dives explaining all this soon for getting all the details. And we can have maybe in next week's AMA, we can talk about specific questions people have if we can get that documentation out in time. But super high level, basically mainnet pop mining, the protocol is designed to balance the rewards versus how many people are doing it. Because the goal is that the protocol doesn't overpay for Bitcoin publications, but it ensures enough decentralization in those publications that the system is fault tolerant. And so the target is going to be 5 active pop miners, which means the protocol wants each keystone to get pop mined to Bitcoin 5 times. And so it'll adjust the amount of quote unquote pop points that get distributed based on that. And then at TGE, those pop points will convert to tokens, and we'll announce how that system works. but it'll be transparent. People will know what they're working with. And then post TGE, you'll just get directly rewarded in tokens. But the way that self-balancing system works is if there are, say, 6 pop miners active and they all pop mine the same keystone, the Hemi protocol sees that and says, okay, we have more pop publications than our target, so we're going to lower the rewards given out for the next keystone to pop miners. And then if the next keystone 3 pop miners show up, then it says, okay, now we're below our target, so we have to adjust it up. So it's a self-balancing system based on targeting 5 pop publications per keystone. And if there's more than that, it adjusts the rewards down for the next keystone period. If they're higher than that, it adjusts the rewards down. If we're below that target of 5 publications, it adjusts the rewards up. And it does that within the bounds of that the total Hemi emissions is 3 to 7%. 2% of that is sequencers. So the amount that go to pop miners is 1 to 5%, with minus a little bit that's shared for the Ethereum DA side. But that's a separate discussion. The main point is the vast majority of that 1 to 5% is going to go to pop miners. And where it lands in that 1 to 5% is based on that self-balancing mechanism. If they can't afford 5 pop publications per keystone while going at the maximum amount of tokens it can emit per keystone at that 5% emissions maximum, then it'll scale back the target. So it will not exceed the maximum emissions cap. That shouldn't happen unless Bitcoin fees go absolutely insane. We've baked in, kind of worst case scenarios for Bitcoin fees versus, Hemi economic activity. And that's what we've worked backwards to get to 5% being the maximum there that can be emitted for those pop rewards. But it will be that self-balancing system. So people who are engaged in mainnet pop mining will have to be aware of how that system works and engage with it so that they are, not spending more on Bitcoin fees than they're getting in rewards, basically. And pre-TGE, you'll be getting those points that will then convert post-TGE. And I would like to clarify those points are entirely different from incentivized mainnet points. They're called pop points. That is, you will get basically a non-transferable token in your wallet. But those points have nothing to do with the, absent points. It is an entirely different system. So more details on that soon. Everyone will be able to read through it and understand and ask questions prior to mainnet launch. But that's the high level mechanic.
All right. Since 10 days ago, the PopStats website seems to be stuck at Bitcoin block 36,167,20. Let's just put it like that. Do new keystones earn points, or has this stopped?
That's just the stats page. We had an infrastructure outage. Basically, a hypervisor died, and we need to get that back up and running. Yes, people are continuing to earn points for doing pop transactions for mining keystones. We just need to get the stat service back up and synced. So that's one of the to-do items on our list. Obviously, mainnet stuff and node sale follow-up has been taking priority over that, but we will be, sorry, I just dropped something. But we will be getting that back up and running for that visibility. But it's just stats. It implies nothing about the actual pop points program that is continuing to run as normal.
All right. There are currently many users running pop miners, with the team announcing more than 200,000 of them. How will this work with such a massive number of miners? So
there will be a lot of points for pop mining.
Okay. I was going to say, I think it's how does incentivization for pop miners work? So there will be a lot of points is the answer. Okay. When will points for keystones be added? Last week, Max stated it should be done by the end of that week.
Hoping to get that up this weekend. Like I think I mentioned in a previous answer. So TBD, we're trying to get that done. Other stuff took precedence this past week that came up unexpectedly. Or not unexpectedly, but took longer than expected. But we are looking to get that up very shortly.
All right. I'm just checking my list twice, like Crypto Santa. We got one more node question. Pathfinder nodes and the specs provided in the last AMA seemingly means that running a node will cost around $20 per month per node, which means an additional $960 for 48 months. This makes a node impractical to run as an individual. So could there be any consideration that when onboarding cloud partners, could this be considered when onboarding cloud partners? I would personally be okay with paying $100 for 4 years, and then they put win-win with good margin for business.
Yep, good question. So yes, the specs for running a node are definitely non-trivial. There's a lot of people who have, an extra machine, an old desktop or I don't want to say Raspberry Pi, although that may be possible to run a node on that, but I don't want to make that promise. But a lot of people do have hardware laying around that they could easily run for, just the cost of electricity and run a node. That being said, if you're only buying one license and you would have to go out and, rent a VPS or something to get a machine that has those specs that can run a node, that would be expensive compared to one node license and the income that one node license is earning. And so that's part of why we're partnering with the cloud providers. And because they can link 100 licenses to one physical node, they can provide that service to individual, people holding one license or 3 licenses. They can provide that very cost effectively. So we haven't finalized the exact tokenomics with them for, what percentage they'll need delegated. But as a, reference point, a lot of previous node sales have basically, charged the user a single digit percentage of the node license income, whether that's 2% or 4% TBD, but something in that range for running the infrastructure on their behalf. So we're doing everything we can with the infrastructure providers to make it affordable. That is where the 100 node licenses per physical node came from, is to make sure that people who buy a lot of licenses don't need to run crazy infrastructure, but also making sure that these cloud partners are able to provide cost-effective infrastructure, because they're not running 5,000 physical nodes or something crazy. They can run 20 nodes, and that can enable 2,000 licenses to be linked to it, for example.
All right, and to close things off, will testnet continue running as is after mainnet is launched?
Yes, in some sense. So given the incentives for testnet are going to end, testnet itself as a network that people can interact with and use, that will of course continue to run, and that's where we'll continue to test new upgrades to the protocol before they go live on mainnet. There may be some, and keyword there may be, and if there will be a small number of incentives for doing stuff on testnet when it makes sense and provides value to the protocol. So for example, if we're testing decentralized sequencing on testnet, we may decide to give some points to people who engage in that system because it's giving us valuable testing feedback. But the vast, vast majority of incentives once mainnet launches will be for mainnet activity. And there will not be any testnet incentives for mainnet day one. Those would come post mainnet if we have features for a short period of time that we want people to engage with on testnet, so we can really battle test it before activating it on mainnet. So testnet will keep running. Testnet will receive feature upgrades before they go live on mainnet. The testnet incentives will end. There may be very occasionally small incentives for doing something on testnet, but that is not guaranteed. And the mainnet activities is where 99% or some number like that at least of the incentives are going.
Awesome. I hope that clears things up for the folks asking. All right, before I turn things over to Max and Phil for an outro, I didn't get the chance to do it on Tuesday, so I just want to thank our amazing community team, our mods and helpers, Anubis, Ajit, Alex, Avi, our intern, creator, Foxstar, Funky, Hadu, Koki, Lyco, New Size, No Tears, and Yahoos. Thank you all for all you do, and please know that you are heard. Turning over to Max, I just want to thank everyone for attending today for the extra session, and I know we ran long, so thanks for sticking with us. Over to Max and Phil for outros. We'll see you around.
Awesome. Appreciate everyone showing up and giving us some grace on the technical issues with the X space randomly dying. So appreciate everyone who came back for the part 2, I suppose, or part 3 of this week, technically. Thanks everyone for coming out. And again, huge thanks to all the mods and community helpers. I know you're keeping Rick and Joshua at least somewhat sane and making their lives at least tolerable. And so huge thank you to you guys for that and for all the help you're giving the community. And we will see you next week.
I'm Batman. Yep. In any event, ditto to all of that. Obviously, we're head down, ears back here, prepping for mainnet and so much else in between. Consensus Hong Kong, East Denver, Bitcoin, and I think it's Bitcoin Investor Week, I think it's called, New York, which is concurrent with East Denver, just a whole bunch of stuff in the pipeline. So that's my quick update, but more next week, gang.
All right. Take care all and have a great weekend.
All right. Ciao. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone.